Hey everyone, welcome back to Portal of Wisdom. I'm back today with another story for you, or actually a couple of stories for you. These stories are going to be based in the late 1800s in the Prescott, Arizona area. And if you are new to the channel, you can like and subscribe so you get alerted when I post new videos to my channel. And we will start off and start telling you these stories. So, the two stories are about the lost gold of Dead Horse Creek and Herman Perch's gold. That is the gentleman's name, Herman Perch. So, we'll start off with the lost gold of Dead Horse Creek. So, to start off with this story, we need to give you a little bit of background of the area first. So, this area around what is present day Prescott, Arizona, that was the initial site of Fort Whipple. And Fort Whipple was a fort that was built in Arizona Territory in 1864. And it was established here to protect the miners and ranchers and settlers in the area from the Apache and the Yavapai natives because there were various attacks and incidents and things like that, enough to where the government figured there was a good reason or a good need to have a fort in this location to protect the citizenry around there. So it was located near Prescott, Arizona, which was the first territorial capital of Arizona Territory. It was built in 1864, so right toward the tail end of the Civil War era. And Arizona actually would not become a state until 1912, so this was Arizona Territory for a long time after Fort Whipple was erected. So Prescott was the base of operations for hundreds, if not thousands, of miners and prospectors who would come and go from the town and purchase supplies and eat and rest and visit the bars and other places in town. And then they would head back out into the mountains to prospect for more gold or silver or whatever they were prospecting for, which most of the time it was gold, maybe even silver. Much of the time, they paid for their goods in gold nuggets and gold dust and stuff along those lines. And it was this that they were getting out of the surrounding mountains. And when they needed to come back to town to resupply, they would come and they would pay for their goods with their gold nuggets and stuff like that. And much of the time they were prospecting in the surrounding mountains of Prescott, especially directly to the south. And these mountains were the Bradshaw Mountains, and they could be very dangerous. And of course, dangerous for many reasons. The wildlife and, rattlesnakes and stuff like that, Native American attack, very, desolate, and depending on the time of year, there may or may not be adequate water. But anyhow, Fort Whipple would send out patrols to monitor the areas around Prescott and keep potential problems at bay, or they would try to do so as much as possible and make their presence known. But there were many times that things happened and they had to respond. And one of these cases was in 1871 when a cavalry patrol was sent out to a nearby ranch due to a Native American attack by the Yavapai. A local rancher was attacked and his ranch was raided, and during the raid, his ranch hand was killed and around 50 horses were stolen by the Yavapai. So a detachment was sent from Fort Whipple, and this consisted of 12 men and one scout. And they were eventually hot on the trail of the Yavapai. Apparently, by stealing around 50 horses, there were probably a lot of tracks to follow for a good distance. And as the soldiers pursued the natives deep within the Bradshaw Mountains, they came to a creek that they needed to cross. And as they got here, they started to smell a really foul stench in the air. And they were trying to determine where is this foul smell coming from, as it seemed like it smelled like rotting flesh or just pure death. It was apparently very horrifically smelling. And as they looked across the creek on the south side of the creek, they saw the black, rotting carcass of a dead horse. So the horse had obviously been dead for many days and was rotting and producing this horrific smell. So they crossed the creek and they dismounted to give their horses a break and let them drink from the creek while they investigated the dead animal. And as they examined the area, they discovered the remnants of a mining operation very nearby. And it appeared that the mining here had not been going on for many years. This operation was abandoned, many years prior, so it doesn't sound like this horse had anything to do with this mining operation. Just coincidence it was found here at this location and caused them to dismount and kind of look around and investigate what happened to this horse, and then they discover that this area had some old remnants of mining from many years earlier. So as they looked around, they found a stone cabin that kind of blended into the hillside fairly well at this point because the roof had long since fallen in and a pine tree was growing out of the middle of the cabin, and it was apparently gaining some good size to it. So obviously the pine tree had started to grow many years earlier, so the roof had to have caved in many, many years earlier. So obviously no one had been at this location in a long time, and the trees growing up around the area were kind of masking this area a bit. So they almost didn't see the cabin at first, but as they examined the cabin, once they discovered it, one soldier found 2 gold nuggets about an inch in size or so, about the size of a coin. And they also found an old rusty knife among the ruins, and as they scoured the area some more, they found enough small gold nuggets to fill a small tobacco pouch. So they also found another larger, much heavier rock, maybe 10 or 12 inches long and a few inches thick, so, pretty heavy. But they discovered that this rock was laced with gold veins running through it. But apparently this rock was too heavy at this point to, for them to try to haul with them. So at this point, they knew there was a lot more gold to be had here in this area, and they would need to remember this location and try to come back when they were not on a chase. Maybe then they could head this way again when they were on a normal basic patrol and explore some more and see what else they could find. But at this point, they knew they already had let too much time pass and they needed to get back on the trail of the Yavapai and the missing horses. So apparently they took their small little tobacco pouch of some gold nuggets and, small little bits of gold, and they headed the way of the tracks that they were following from the horses that had been stolen. So nothing was really ever said on if they were able to catch up with the Yavapai at this point. Likely they probably weren't, due to time spent exploring this old cabin and mine site and looking around and collecting gold nuggets. They might have let too much time elapse and the Native Americans may have gotten away. But the group of soldiers had always referred to this site as Dead Horse Creek. And the soldiers eventually were able to head that way on a patrol again, but it was said they were never able to find this precise location again. And like it was mentioned when they first saw it, it blended in so well they almost didn't see it when they were right upon it. So it's very easy to understand how, now that they didn't remember exactly where it was along this creek, and there were a lot of creeks in this area. Pretty easy to understand how they may not have been able to locate it again. And there are a lot of creeks and washes in this area, depending upon rains, especially certain times of year. You may have some washes that actually run and appear to be creeks, and you may have, certain creeks that don't flow year round and things like that, making it extremely difficult to tell if they were on a permanent creek or just one that would appear to be flowing after some heavy rains. There are a lot of areas in this particular area in the Bradshaw Mountains and up and down the hills and the mountains that have a lot of pine trees too, and pretty thick in a lot of places. So it could be very easy to think that you may not be able to find this location looking through the trees unless you were maybe a few dozen feet from the actual location, as they almost missed it to begin with. And many places around Prescott still bear the name Dead Horse in them in reference to this original use of the Dead Horse name in Dead Horse Creek. I believe there's a Dead Horse Ranch State Park that's on the Verde River, and I think there's a couple other places around the area that use Dead Horse in the name, and supposedly those are all linked to this original Dead Horse Creek legend of this lost gold. It may still be out there. So the next story we are going to talk about is Herman Perch's gold. In the 1890s, a recluse prospector, his name was Herman Perch. He was known to visit Prescott, Arizona for supplies. Like we mentioned, Prescott was kind of a hub for a lot of miners and prospectors to come and get supplies. And this gentleman, Herman Perch, he had some mining claims in the Bradshaw Mountains, and apparently prospected on his way to and from his claims and all over the Bradshaw Mountains. It was said that he had a cabin about 5 miles south of Prescott near Palace Station in the Bradshaw Mountains, off of what is currently called the Senator Highway, or the old Senator Highway. He was known to prospect all over those mountains, and it was known that he always had plenty of gold to pay for his goods with gold. But that was not unusual, as many prospectors in this area paid in gold for their goods. But he didn't come into town very often, so when he did, he needed a lot of supplies and food and ammunition and all kinds of supplies for his pack animals and horses and so on. He needed a lot of stuff because he came into town fairly infrequently. So his bill could be quite hefty for all of the goods and supplies and everything that he needed. But he was said to never be short on gold to pay for all of the needed supplies. He always had more than enough. So people eventually took notice, and they figured the old man was a pretty proficient prospector. He was well liked, and many of the townsfolk made sure that no one bothered the old man. On one of his trips into town to resupply, the store proprietor asked the old man how long it took to acquire so much gold and how much that he had managed to collect so far. And Herman had responded and told this store owner it was fairly easy to get this much gold, but it just required a little bit of work. He also said that he now had enough to live on for the rest of his life. This happened to actually be the last time anyone saw Herman alive. A couple of weeks later, a young boy from a local ranch came across Herman's cabin, and it had been burnt to the ground, and near the ruins was Herman's dead and blackened body. It appeared he had been dead for at least a few days, and it appeared that he had been shot. No one knew who did it, and no one in town ever saw any more gold come into the town that appeared to have the same type of composition as Herman's gold. It was believed that he had his gold stored somewhere nearby his cabin and may have had many pounds of gold amassed since he thought he didn't need to mine any longer. The exact location of Herman's cabin is not known. We don't know exactly where it was or if he had a spot near his cabin where he had hidden his gold, or if there was a flagstone in the cabin that he had a spot hollowed out to keep his gold, or if his gold was kept somewhere nearby where he was mining it. So that is the story of Herman Perch's lost gold. I guess we don't really know. It's possible someone could have found the location and explored a bit with a metal detector and maybe found things, and it's very possible it could still be out there. So those are our two stories today. If you have any comments or thoughts, you can leave them in the comments section. Thanks for listening.